It's an honor to be here. Thank you very much for hosting me, and I hope you enjoy the next hour and 10 minutes or so. I've got plenty to show you. I'm going to talk a little bit, and then I brought some pictures to show. So we'll get to the pictures, but I'd like to talk a little bit first. So I'm up cruising in Maine a couple summers ago. Always nice to be in Maine. Maine in the summertime, in the months of July and August, the water almost warms up. It's great fun, and I've been invited to be on a cruising boat for a full week, and we're going to just visit different islands and go around Maine. Morning of our cruise, we got in the night before, and I'm tired, and I wake up, and as I walk up on deck, I'm asked the best question you can be asked in the sport of sailing. The question I was asked was, would you like to take the helm? Who here would turn down that question? Yes, I would like to take the helm. So I go back to the wheel with my hands on the wheel and my feet on the deck. By the way, this is a rather nice cruising boat. This is the Endeavor, 130 feet long, 183-foot mast, 63-foot boom, and 8 professional crew whose sole job was to make the 4 guests, of which I was lucky enough to be one, happy for a week. Would you like to take the helm? So the 2,000-pound mainsail gets hoisted up, both jibs get hoisted up, and the anchor comes up, and we back the jibs, and the bow bears away, and we start moving forward. And after about 3 minutes, the boat is heeled at 18 degrees. We're sailing upwind at 10.2 knots. And at the wheel of the helm, I looked up, and there was this bird flying over the mast. I think the bird looking down related to the shape of our mainsail with the shape of the wing. And that moment between the sky and the bird and the sails and my hands on the wheel and feet on the deck and the boat under me and going through the water, everything existed as one. And it dawned on me, isn't that what sailing's all about? The freedom to get away from land, to spend time with your best friends that you have in life that share the same passion, to understand and how to commune with nature. And if another boat comes along, whether you're cruising or racing, you're racing. I knew I was with a good crowd here. And so as I was thinking about it, even though I was on this magnificent J-boat Endeavor, I think those attributes apply to every boat, no matter what size you're on, whatever. So anyway, that's my little opening thought. We're going to go have some fun as we go around the race course. Now I should tell you, I've actually been here to Little Rock before. The last time I was invited to speak here, I came on March 27th, 1980. I wasn't even 30 years old. So if you invite me back, try to make it sooner than 31 years, because I'm getting older. And I did get a tour of the Clinton Library today. What a magnificent facility that I think will bring people from around the world, and it really celebrates what goes on as a president, and how cool looking at the Oval Office and realizing, boy, I bet a lot of stuff happened on that couch. And I've been to the White House myself 3 times in my career, and I don't know why, but it's always a Democrat that invites me. Ted Turner wins the America's Cup, and Jimmy Carter has us to the White House, and during the Clinton years I got there, and I did meet Bill and Hillary, and I was there when Larry Ellison won the Cup with Barack Obama about a little over a year ago. So I've been there 3 times, and it's very cool, and I'm sure he's done a lot for Little Rock. And I'm so happy that you have sailing here, and you got a pretty big lake to do it too, and an awful lots of kinds of boats. So with that, bear with me. I'm going to tell 10 stories, and then we're going to go to the video. And by the way, yes, I did bring a book. Pretty close, huh? And I'd be happy to sign it for you, and the proceeds do go to the club. So I just want you to know that. So I'm at a party last winter, and it's freezing cold, and I know it gets cold here sometimes too, and it was one of those nights, and there was this elderly gentleman I'd known a long time. He was 88 years old, and he decided for him it was time to retire from sailing. And the fireplace was going. I went over to warm up by the fireplace, and on the mantle of the fireplace was this brick of metal, and inscribed on the brick of metal were the words, Yacht Racing, 1946-2009. He had taken every trophy he'd ever won, melted it down, put it in a brick, and there it is. Now, this is my kind of guy. You know, when it all said and done, there it is, win or lose, yacht racing, 1946 to 2009. Now, there are many highs and lows in the sport of sailing. Let me ask a personal question. Who here has ever been last in a sailboat race? I got my hand up. Welcome to the club. And who here has ever won a sailboat race? About the same. So as you know, it's usually more fun to win a race than it is to lose a race. So I'm going to tell some stories on both sides of the equation, but let me start out with a win, or close to a win. It's an Etchells Regatta last fall. Up in Annapolis, it's the end of the season, late October, last weekend, a year ago anyway. And there are about 25 boats in this Etchells Regatta, 5-race series, 3 Saturday, 2 Sunday, you know the gist. And anyway, as the weekend went on, we came down to the last race, and I was tied with another boat. The other boat had even score, and whoever won the last race between us was going to win the pickle dish, which I guess someday I will melt down and put on my mantelpiece. So in this last race, we come off the starting line, windward, leeward, twice around, 2-mile legs, and we're right next to our arch rival going upwind. Now, there was a difference between the crews of our boats. Let's see, a year ago I was 60, my main trimmer was 61, and my foredeck crew, he was young, he was 54. Over on the other boat, the helmsman's 27, his main trimmer's about 24, and I don't know how old the bowman was. And we're bigger than these people, and yet they're hiking harder and going faster. We round the windward mark, and they're 2 boat lengths ahead. Down when we go, both of us have good spinnaker sets, but they just kind of work that sail a little bit better, 4 lengths ahead at the leeward gate. 2 legs to go. Back upwind, if you can believe this, every time we tacked, these people would tack on our wind. The oxygen mask popped out of the boom so I could breathe. You laugh, I keep it right next to the Advil dispenser. Well, anyway, halfway up the windward leg, they tacked on us again, and we tacked away, but this time, they had a 6 boat length lead and didn't cover. So we head out to the left side of the course, they go off to the right side, and as we got out toward the ley line, lucky us, the wind shifted 15 degrees to the left. So when we tacked on this big lift, they out there on the right tacked on a header, and we came together and we were almost even. We dipped behind their stern and tacked right on their transom, both boats on the ley line heading for the windward mark. Now this must have rattled the young man, because the young man is staring at me. So I took my sunglasses off and I'm staring at him. He's looking at me, I'm looking at him, and I have to report it was a thing of beauty, because I'm quite sure he did not mean to hit the mark. Boom. Being older and been around a little bit longer than these guys, we didn't look at them, we didn't laugh, we didn't chuckle, we just put our spinnaker up and continued downwind, and we went on to win the race. Now, an hour and a half later, we're back at the Annapolis Yacht Club to get our pickle dish, and the young man went up to get his second place prize. Now, if you're like me, and you get a second place, I usually feel pretty good about it. Not this guy, long pan, sourpuss, you got second. Anyway, I went up to him after the trophy ceremony. I said, look, I know how you feel. Believe me, pal, I've lost more than my share of races. But look at it this way. 30 years from now, when you beat some 20-year-olds, you'll know how good we feel, so just suck it up. It really... Thank you. Now, we all remember the most trusted man in America at one point in his career, Walter Cronkite. And as a young man, I actually got to sail with Walter, and he was a great friend for a long time. He passed away 2 years ago now, and he had some great stories. I'm going on the Bermuda race, the Marion Bermuda race, by the way, which I understand one of your members won a few years back. Very cool. I mean, think how many people do that race and you actually win the whole thing. Pickle dish. Yacht racing, 1952 to 2011. P.S. I won the Bermuda race. Well, anyway, so Walter Cronkite tells his story one night in front of the entire New York Yacht Club. Well, we were racing to Bermuda. You can hear his voice. And young Jobson here, he never got my name right. Young Jobson decides we're getting in too much wind and we need to shorten sail. And he's running around the deck and reefs the main and goes below into the lazarette and pulls up this small jib and drags it to the foredeck with waves breaking over the bow. So I'm up there getting ready at the main reef. I'm getting a small jib ready. Jobson, come back here. He says to me, if you want a smaller jib, why don't you just roll it up? I'd never been on a boat with a roller furler before. I mean, he was great. Walter had such a great sense of humor. He tells this story. It was a mighty proud day, he says, when I became a member of the New York Yacht Club. And in honor of that moment, I went out and bought myself a yacht, a 32-foot yacht. And I took it in the club's cruise. And at the end of the first squadron run, I was coming back into the dock when the Commodore of the New York Yacht Club himself came down to greet me. I was so proud in front of my crew. Here's the Commodore. And he took me off to a room, a private room, the men's room. And he told me if I wanted to remain a member of the New York Yacht Club, I should learn to fly the Burgee correctly. He had had it upside down. Pretty good. Now, has anybody here been out to see the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor? Pretty cool place. I mean, it's kind of awe-inspiring. And occasionally, they actually have racing there. I sailed there 3 weekends ago, right off the statue. And this is a match race regatta that's taking place in New York Harbor, and there are 8 countries invited, and I'm representing the United States. And when you see USA on your sail, it's important. You want to do well for the United States. Straight Mount Gay. Those couches, you know, they're long. I thought it was good. So anyway, we're racing in New York Harbor, and as it turns out, through the week, we end up into the finals, and we're up against some country called Australia in the finals of this championship. The same Australian crew, by the way, that several years earlier had taken the America's Cup away from the New York Yacht Club. Now I'm racing those same guys in New York Harbor. Windward mark, about a mile to windward, long 2 miles downwind, and then back up to the windward mark to the finish. Whoever wins this last race is going to win the championship. We're going downwind under spinnakers, and we're a boat length ahead of the Australians. The pressure's on, as you know, with a boat a length behind you, but there was a problem. The current was ebbing out of New York Harbor at about 4 knots, so we're barely making progress in these Benettos going downwind against the current. And I'm getting nervous. How are we going to hold these boats back? And I got an idea. I started wondering, how deep is the water behind Liberty and Ellis Island? Maybe if we went behind the islands in the shallow water, less current, and we can beat the Aussies that way. So as we crept up to the ferry dock by the Statue of Liberty, before 9/11, when you could go to the ferry dock, and we jived away from the Australians to go behind the island. Guess what? No current. We went past Liberty. We continued on past Ellis, jibed toward the leeward mark, rounded the leeward mark, heading upwind with the current now toward the finish line. The Australians were still stuck in the current at the ferry dock, and we went on to win the race. Yes. Thank you. However, my story does not end there. My story does not end there. A year later, I'm in the same regatta. We're going against the Australians. Same course, windward, leeward, but this time we're a boat length behind the Australians. How are we going to catch them? They're up current for us. Hard to do. And as we crept against the current, we got to the ferry dock with the Australians in the lead. They jibed away from us to pull the same trick on me that I'd pulled on them a year earlier. Now, the sad part about this story is we didn't have our onboard ESPN cameras and microphones to see the look on their faces and what they had to say when they found out that that winter, a bridge had been built. A bridge had been built from Ellis Island over to New Jersey, 8 feet high. We won that race too. Now, we all have defining moments in our life, and one of mine came when I was 19 years old, and I was getting ready for a big regatta this weekend on Barnegat Bay, New Jersey, where I grew up. It was the 420 Nationals coming to Barnegat Bay. I'd been practicing for about a week and had my crew ready. And 2 days before the regatta, a friend of mine who just finished his freshman year in college was driving an ice cream truck for the summer. He later made more money on Wall Street. And he had this idea that we should go to a rock concert this weekend, help him sell ice cream in his truck, we'll make a fortune, and it'll be great. So I thought, boy, that sounds pretty cool. So I went to my father and said, Dad, what do you think? I could go to this rock concert, it sounds really intriguing, or I could sail the 420. He says, look, you can go to a rock concert any time of your life, any weekend you want, but the 420 Nationals only comes to Barnegat Bay once in the summer. I recommend you sail. I took his advice. I ended up 18th or something in the 420 Nationals, and as it turned out, I ended up missing Woodstock. So you never know. All right, I'm going to apologize in advance for this story because I'm going to drop some big names here, but it's a good story. And my message here is that some people are really good at some things, but not everything. Some people are good at some things, but not everything. So I spent a year racing with Larry Ellison on his big maxi boat, Sayonara. I was the tactician for a year, and we were in Europe and all around the U.S., and it's very cool doing this. And this one weekend, he invited Ted Turner to come spend the weekend with us sailing on the boat. I kind of arranged it. I kept sitting in between these two billionaires, hoping that their vast wealth would somehow help me out, but that never happened. Well, anyway, this end of, in fact, it took 2 days before Ellison actually let Ted steer his boat. And on Sayonara, they have an instrument that tells you how fast your theoretical speed could go, the boat can go. 10.2 knots, it said, based on wind speed, sea state, air temperature, the height of the waves, Oracle stock, I don't know, a lot of, which is pretty good lately, is going, and Ted's steering a boat and it says we should be going 10.2 knots, but poor Ted can only get it going 10.1 knots. And he's getting frustrated, he can't get the boat up to full speed, and Ellison gets up and he starts coaching Ted Turner on how to steer a sailboat. Ted's trying and trying, finally gets sick of this guy over his shoulder, steps back from the wheel and says, my gosh, I'm locked in analog in a digital age. Pretty good. Well, that night, Larry has a little dinner party at his house. There's 7 people at the dinner table. I'm one of them. And after dinner, one of his friends had a new movie that he had just produced. So we went down to this pretty nifty movie theater to look at the theater. The name of the guy, passed away recently, was Steve Jobs, one of his Pixar films. And Ted was there with his wife, at least at the time, Jane Fonda, and me, and Jobs' wife, and Larry Ellison. So Larry takes the DVD from Jobs and puts it into the machine, and he can't quite get it to play. So Steven gets up to help. Now, if you're like me and a little challenged with this electronic stuff, you know that the more buttons you push, the worse the whole thing gets. So Ted can't help it, and he gets up and starts pushing buttons, and he can't do it, and then Jane Fonda gets up, and the 4 of them are helping. So I'm sitting there on the couch thinking, we got the 2nd largest software manufacturer in the world, the largest stockholder of the biggest media company, the head of Apple Computers and Pixar, and a 2-time Academy Award-winning actress that can't get a DVD player. This industry's got trouble. Anyway, some guy came out of the kitchen and hit the right combination of buttons, and we ended up watching The Bug's Life. So anyway, like I say, some people are good at some things, but not everything. All right, you game for a couple more stories here? I like rivalries. Do you like rivalries? You know, football and baseball and basketball and sailing. And rivalries are all built about personalities. You know, but the late Tom Blackhauler racing against Dennis Conner. I was Blackhauler's tactician and won America's Cup campaign. And we get into a protest, and Tom always was looking for a way to rattle Conner. We get into a protest, and the protest form would say Denise Conner, not Dennis Conner. And a young Paul Kayard, you might have heard of Paul. He's won the Whitbread and a great sailor. He's 23 years old on our 12-meter. He's now 51. He's 23 at this time. And he decided he had a way to get Conner and the crew upset. So here we are with 3 minutes to go on the starting line in 12 meters. The New York Yacht Club selection committee 2 boat lengths behind, watching the scene. And we're luffing up, neither crew on either boats, looking at each other, ready to trim in and go for the start. And with about 2 minutes to go, Kayard, out of his little compartment, pulls out a grenade, pulls the pin, and lobs it over to Conner's boat. And the crew scatters. Of course, it wasn't real, but it upset him, and we won the start. And poor Kayard got 2 weeks off from sailing for that little stunt. Now, marketing is a very important thing in sailing, so something, Commodore, to think about here when you market our sport. There's a guy named Francis Swigath, 100 years ago this year, designed a little boat called the Bug. And Francis Swigath took his beloved Bug, a little keel boat designed for 2 people, up and down Long Island Sound, down the Jersey Shore, the Chesapeake, out to Cape Cod, trying to sell the boat. And all summer long, he never sold a boat. He's depressed. That winter, he's having lunch with a Madison Avenue friend of his, telling him that he can't sell any of these boats, but it's a good boat. And the guy's sitting there thinking, you know, maybe nobody wants a boat named the Bug. You need a better name. How about the Star? And the Star's done pretty well ever since. So I thought that's... And then when I was 21 years old, I got invited to sail the single-handed boat. The designer had the single-handed boat. It was called the Weekender. And he asked me if I'd come sail it. 6'2", 180 pounds, at least at that time. And I went and sailed. I thought the Weekender was really cool. But he just didn't sell any for a year. He sold about 10 Weekenders. So he was having lunch with a friend of his from Canada. The guy says, you know, we're in the space age here. We need a better boat. Weekender doesn't cut it. That doesn't sound racing. You need a better name. How about the Laser? The Laser's done pretty well ever since. So my point being that, that marketing does help out a little bit. Okay, a couple more stories and we're ready for pictures. I have locked the door. We're leaving at midnight. I got a lot of stories. All right, I want to tell a story about the America's Cup. And you might recall the controversy in the race committee and the 33rd Cup in Valencia and down in New Zealand where they wouldn't start the races even though it was blowing 8 knots of wind. Well, it's called the home court advantage. You know, when the Arkansas plays at home, more people cheer for their team than when they play away. So here's the 1920 America's Cup. Sir Thomas Lipton, now 72 years old, had challenged for the America's Cup in 1914. On the way across the ocean, Shamrock IV got to New York, but a skirmish broke out in Europe, World War I, and there was no America's Cup that year. In fact, it took 6 years before they had the cup. So Sir Thomas Lipton's Shamrock IV lived in a shed in Shelter Island for 6 years. Now, I have a gut feeling the New York Yacht Club might have gotten some designers into the shed to see what the boat looked like. So by 1920, for the America's Cup, it was the best 5 series, first to win 3 races, and the Shamrock had to sail across the ocean. Long waterline, heavy boat, not much sail area. The American boat, Resolute, in contrast, short waterline, tons of sail area, and a very light boat. Best of 5 series. Race 1 is blowing 25 knots. Shamrock wins by 8 minutes, no problem. Second race, blowing 30 knots. The American boat breaks down, doesn't even get to the finish line. The score is 2-0. Sir Thomas Lipton, one more race and he's going to lift the cup from the dreaded New York Yacht Club. Race 3, it blows 6. That American boat, Resolute, right over the horizon. Race 4, it blows 8. Right over the horizon, 2-2. They come out for the 5th and deciding race. It's blowing 25 knots. Off New York Harbor. Sir Thomas Lipton is lifting his chops. He's going to beat the cup. He's going to win the cup today. But the New York Yacht Club Race Committee decides, in the interest of safety and good seamanship, Commodore, I think it's a little windy for a race today, don't you think? Yeah, I do think it's too windy. They canceled the racing, upsetting Lipton. They came back a day later, blew 6 knots. The Americans retained the America's Cup. So these things have been known to go on. All right, I have 3 important stories, but I'm going to tell one, and then we're going to look at some pictures. So I want to tell, and I hope you can relate to this, my first sailboat race. Can you remember your first sailboat race? I can remember it. 6 years old, a sneak box on Barnegat Bay. Gaff rig, leaky wooden boat, 3 crew on the boat. I'm 6 years old, given 3 jobs. My jobs were pretty simple. Son, here's a bucket and a sponge. You're going to keep this leaky boat dry. Number 2, don't ask any dumb questions, particularly when we get alongside another boat. Just stay quiet. And 3, here's the course chart, and you're going to keep that in your pocket, and every time we get to a buoy, you're going to tell us what the next buoy is. 6 years old, sneak box, 40 boats, the Hodling Trophy, I'll never forget it, and we rounded the first mark in the lead. How cool. I mean, wow. Look at all those boats back there. And I had the boat bone dry, and I hadn't said a peep. And then the skipper asked what the next mark of the course is. course chart had somehow fallen out of my pocket. We went to the wrong buoy and lost the race. I never did get to sail with those guys again, but I learned a valuable lesson that you always got to know what the course is. So all the rest of my career, I've always known what the next mark of the course is, and more importantly, what the goal is. So just keep that story in mind. All right, we ready for some pictures here? All right. I brought some pictures along, and when you look at these pictures, I want to be braggy about one item, that every image starts from scratch. And if you've ever tried to take pictures or video on the water, you know how hard it is to get good, stable pictures. And I've spent a lot of years working on stabilized cameras and how to do this from helicopters and onboard. So anyway, I hope you enjoy these pictures, and we're going to go around the waterfront and see some action. With that, if we could hit the lights, and I hope this works. I'll have to get the guy in Larry Ellison's kitchen to come here do this. Anyway, I have this shot. This is Boston Harbor. I'm in the helicopter. We're doing about 100 knots at 100 feet. And as you look at the land there, notice in the distance is a lighthouse. A lighthouse, a beacon of hope. Whether you're making departure, heading to sea, or returning from a voyage, anytime you see that lighthouse, you have to feel good. And that word hope, well, that resonates in this part of the world, doesn't it? Anyway, as I mentioned in my first story, when you're on the water, that is what life is all about. Life is magic. That's my open. All right, we're going to take a look at a couple pictures from around the waterfront, put to some music and a variety of shots. And my talk tonight is called Sailing, Speed, and Passion.
There's nothing that's quite as empowering as figuring out how to make that invisible finger push you along.
Better thing to do on a day like today?
Nice name.
East Jib just a little bit.
It's in my blood. I've always dreamt about sailing, and that's what I like to do.
It's a passion. It's a calling.
That's my little opener. We're going to look at a whole variety of sailing, starting out with collegiate sailing. 214 colleges in America have active varsity sailing teams. I've covered the nationals the last year for ESPN, and I can tell you these sailors are not shy.
And we're live in 5.
I like these little nifty cameras that we put on their boats during the action.
Hey world, how you doing? You're back.
So the top 18 teams from around the country qualify for the Nationals, which is in a different part of the country on a 7-year rotation.
I'm Haley.
And as you can see them in these 420s, they're mighty good at boat handling. A number of them will try to get to the Olympics, and it's tight. To win the college nationals, last year a 6.1 average ended up winning the whole thing out of 18 teams. And the last place team was 11.8 average. So only 5 points separated first from last, just showing you how tight this competition is.
Bye.
All right, that's college sailing. Now, where do you go from here? How about the Olympic Games? So we're going to take a little look at the past games and a little look at the next. China. Qingdao, China was the site of the games in 2008. I covered it for NBC. It was my 5th time covering the Olympic Games, which is great fun to do. Qingdao, by the way, is a city of 7 million people, and they did a pretty good job putting together this venue for the games. Now we're going to look at 2 races. The medal race, windward-leeward, twice around, designed to take 40 minutes, and 2 Americans would medal. First up, the Finn class. 24-year-old Zach Raley. Now this was supposed to be a light air venue, but you can see it's blowing pretty good and the waves are big. Sailed neck and neck against Great Britain's Ben Ainsley, who's now won 3 golds. And Zach, 24, ended up with a silver. It's always nice to see an American end up on the podium. And he'll be back in England in 2012, next summer. Now over in the women's single-handed division, later Raziel, Anna Tunnicliffe had a 4-point lead going into the last race. She gets the word from her coach, Luther Carpenter, and here's the start. 10 boats are in the medal race. Anna is winning at this point, but she's got to finish 4th or better to hold on to the gold if Lithuania wins. Individual recall, she's nervous it's her, and she goes back to restart. Remember, windward-leeward, twice around. Lithuania on the left dips China, and after that dip with the starboard advantage would take the lead. Anna, after going back at the start, heads to the right side of the course, doesn't get any wind, and there she is in the lower left of the screen, not doing well. At the windward mark, she's in 8th. Lithuania is in the lead. Her chance for a bronze is silver slipping away, and so is a bronze. What to do? So downwind she goes. She takes a couple chances, jives away. It doesn't work, and at the leeward mark, she's in 9th. 2 legs to go. The right didn't work, so she goes left, gets out on the lay line, and still not doing well. But over her shoulder, see, she's a big puff. So she leaves the fleet, goes well beyond the lay line, and here she is reaching in a puff. And I'm doing my commentary saying unbiased things like, go, Anna, go. She comes reaching into the mark. From 9th place, she gets to the windward mark in 3rd, cutting off China there. And going downwind, Lithuania is still in the lead. Anna's got to be in the top 4. 1 leg to go. She's in 3rd. So she heads downwind here. And Australia, who's ahead of her, to get a bronze, has to push China back. So anyway, Australia just ahead, bails out to go attack China, leaving Anna in 2nd. Anna never won a single race in the games, but had a good, consistent average, which she learned as an All-American at Old Dominion University. Lithuania won this race. Anna got 2nd, the first American woman to win a gold medal in sailing in 20 years. Strong. That's her mother, by the way. Anyway, always nice to see an American hop up on the podium and hear our national anthem in any sport, but particularly in sailing. So anyway, a little look, a recap of our 2 medals in the last games. But of course, the next one's only less than a year away in Weymouth, England. So let's take a look at the next games. So the games, the sailing part is going to be in Weymouth, England, on the south coast of England, about 2-hour drive from London, a place noted for big winds. And Anna has left the laser radial, and she's decided to get into match racing. They had the first set of Olympic trials this past weekend. Here's a shock, Anna won that first round, but she has another round to go. And there's some very talented women that are trying to get there in her place. So here's a little look at Olympic class action. This show, I have a show coming up on Friday night at 6 p.m. Central Time on the Olympic Classes Regatta, and here's a 1-minute look at some of these classes. In Florida last winter, at the Olympic Classes Regatta, 714 sailors from 53 countries, including 197 Americans, sailed in the 10 Olympic classes on Biscayne Bay. As you can see, it was breezy, and I had cameras all over the race course, on the water, up in the air, and on board. Watch your head. That's a helicopter shot, as you can see, down on the water, and some pretty cool shots on board. That's Paige Raley, the American, who's probably going to win a medal in the laser radial. And they let me, whoops, that doesn't look good. I've done that too. But anyway, they let me put cameras aboard their boats. That's Stu McKay, Graham Beal, Olympians from '08. And the Paralympic sailors were there too. That's Clay Johnson in the laser. Zach Raley, who I told you about, I had a camera on his boat. Graham Beal fell over. Oh, Sally Barkow goes over. Hey, wait for me. That's a good way to lose a match race. So anyway, pretty exciting stuff. And every single sailor out here has exactly the same goal, to get to Weymouth and sail in the Olympics. And if you get there, then you want to get a medal. It's a lifelong dream for all these young sailors. And as you can see, they're working mighty hard. So anyway, a look at the last games and a preview of the next. All right, you want to do a little long distance racing? I'm going to take you on 5 different long distance races, a minute each. First up, this is nighttime. Sailing across the ocean. I've crossed the Atlantic 6 times in my career, and I can tell you it's a long way across the ocean. My most recent voyage 5 years ago was on a clipper ship, and I got into a dinghy to get this picture. 30-knot winds, 15-foot seas. The ship is going 15 knots. What a remarkable shot. Very rare in mid-ocean to take this picture. I was mighty glad to get back on board, by the way. I went up the mast twice to get these pictures looking down. It took me a week to get the courage to go the second time. Hey, you remember a few years ago that controversy in the Super Bowl? Well, a dangerous place to be is a bowsprit, and this is what you would call a wardrobe malfunction. Hey, watch it. You need some foul weather gear? No, I'll be fine, he says. Okay. Well, at least he was still laughing. Wait for me. All right, this is our Bermuda race a year ago. I plan to do it again next year. I've done 8 of them over the years. And always a great sight, seeing the boats get ready for the start. I'm the tactician on a 66-footer for the Bermuda race. Good crowd at Castle Hill off Newport to watch the start. 14 classes of boats, and we're in the biggest boat division. Now you might wonder why we're on port tack, as the gun is about to go off. And unfortunately for us, there's the gun, and we're over the line. So when you're the tactician and you're over the line, it gets mighty quiet on the sidelines, so to speak. And the rest of the fleet is heading for Bermuda, and we're heading back to restart. Ouch. So sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But I'm happy to report an hour later, we did better. 635 miles from Newport to Bermuda. An hour later, there we are in the lead on our boat. So all was forgiven, and we're on our way now. 630 miles to go with Newport fading in the background. Aurora, a nifty boat, and as you can see, the crew's sitting on the rail. Everybody's happy to be heading to Bermuda. Hey, 12 knots of wind, southwest direction. Yoo-hoo! And we had some visitors. Dolphins, always a sign of safe passage for mariners for centuries. These things are amazing athletes. Watch this guy jump. Woo! And at nighttime, the routine goes on. 4 hours on, 4 hours off, as we press our way into the Gulf Stream, trying to take advantage of the clouds and the winds and the meanders in the stream. Hey, maybe there's more wind under that cloud. Well, for us on Aurora, 635 miles, 71 hours after starting, we finally arrived at the island paradise. Always nice to have a fast passage out in the ocean.
14/18/59.
But it's not always that way. All right, we made it. Now, sometimes sailing isn't as much fun. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but calm. A sailor's worst nightmare. Nothing, nada, zero. You're sitting there worried that your competition over the horizon is speeding away from you, and there's nothing you can do but sit and wait in this windless high. Crew morale seems to go down. What do you do? Hey, there's a whale. No swimming now. Drifting along, hoping to make progress. Here was my commentary at the time.
0.00.
That's slow. Now let me just show you how much fun I'm having here. This is me in the back of the boat hanging out by the wheel, waiting for the wind. Let me just show you a lot of enthusiasm. Me. Anyway, it's better when it's breezy. So this is the Vineyard Race a year ago. Stamford, Connecticut to Martha's Vineyard and back. Hurricane Earl has just blown through. And here we are going downwind after the start. Although this guy should have eased the spinnaker out. I got a guy out on the end of the boom making some adjustments out there, and it's blowing 30 knots. We're going downwind on Aurora, 66-footer, trying hard to get up to 20 knots. Let's get this guy back in.
Get him up! Get him up! Get him up! Get back up here now!
Good thing he was tethered on. You know, you spend your whole life waiting for days like this where it's blowing 20 to 26. My wife hated the beard, but here I am trying to hit 20 knots, and I'm not going to give up the helm until I attain that number. And I finally did. The flip side is going back upwind. So after rounding the tower, here we go, upwind. It's a little harder. Night is coming on, getting colder, down into the 40s. Still breezing 25 knots, big waves. And it's a moment just like this that you ask the question, whose idea was this? Put on the foul weather gear, and anyway, you're all mighty glad to reach the finish line. So here's one more. Stan Honey, my friend, on the board of U.S. Sailing, navigated Group Bomba a year ago, 48 days around the world non-stop. All Frenchmen on the boat except for the American Stan. They did it in 48 days. 23.7 knot average for 24 hours a day. I look at these pictures and say, I'd kind of like to be dropped on for about an hour, have my ride, and get off. Anyway, I asked Stan if he could go faster, and he said he thought the record could be broken by 5 days. So even Jules Verne only envisioned 80 days around the world. So anyway, a little look at long-distance racing. This next clip is a show that airs this Friday night and Sunday afternoon on the New York Yacht Club's Invitational Cup. So here's a couple moments from that regatta. The New York Yacht Club envisioned this race for all amateurs, and your club is on the verge of getting an invitation to compete in the trials next summer to get into this regatta. So I'm going to quietly cheer for you. Anyway, Swan Club 42s, all identically matched, all identical sails. Spend 11 races in this competition, and to me, this is the essence of our sport. Close sailing, good teamwork, lots of camaraderie, and after all, you're trying hard. You're racing for both your club and your country. To get into the regatta from the U.S., 24 yacht clubs from around the country are invited to compete in the top 3 to sail in the Invitational Cup in the year 2013. So this took place in September. As you can see, I had cameras on board, cameras up in the air, and cameras down on the water to get some of the action. So maybe your club can qualify. So my advice, get a good team, give it everything you got, and get into the top 3, and you'll be up there. A lot of spectators, a lot of fun, and sometimes it gets a little too close.
pulling, keep pulling. Watch your head!
Oh, what? I didn't hear that.
He won't even involve!
Stand by. Just do it. Just do it. Doesn't matter. Just do it. Turn about.
Anyway, very cool to do a program of this
Legacy.
and explain what racing big boats on closed courses and tight competition. Canada, Royal Canadian Yacht Club was first, New York Yacht Club second, and I'm proud to say our club, Annapolis Yacht Club, was third.
Swiggle kind of thing, right?
Newport Harbor fourth, Eastern Yacht Club fifth. So the Americans did well. There were 22 teams from 16 countries in the Invitational Cup. And you can see everybody's giving it their all.
Hold the tip there, hold. Okay, start coming up slowly. Real puff in 3, 2.
I'm Gary Jobson. Thanks for watching.
All right, we got a little more to go here. I just thought you like those clips. It's something that I hope your team gets to. All right, let me move on here. Next story. It's good, huh? All right, here we go. Heavy year, the essence of our sport. When it's blowing hard and the crew's working hard, it's fun and exciting. But sometimes the unthinkable can happen out there on the race course. But it's days like this that you live for. Wouldn't you agree? Can you see okay? You can move over there. We got a lot of room. A runaway spinnaker. Hey, where's the crew? Nice going upwind, pounding the windward. Anyway, anytime it's windy, life is good. Woohoo! Speed. This is a trifoiler, Russell Long's long shot, 43 knots. This is me sailing a trifoiler. I hit 36 knots on this run. Look at that thing accelerate. Yellow Pages held the world speed record for 17 years, 46.52 knots. Can that record be broken? It can, not by a trimaran. Around the world, 23.7, that's pretty good. These guys can fly. I like the moth, speedy things, Bora Glory on his moth. Sailboards have gone 51 knots and they too can fly. But the world speed record now is held by a kiteboard. Is it sailing? You bet. It's run by the wind, 54 knots. The classics. Everybody loves a classic yacht. Wouldn't you agree? When you look at these boats sailing around the Isle of Wight, we're commemorating America's victory 150 years earlier. Pretty spectacular stuff. And as you look at these boats, realize that each one of them was built for speed. They were technological marvels during the days that they raced. Boats ranging from J-boats, giant ships from the 1800s, 12 meters in American and modern class, America's Cup yachts are sailing. The bow of that boat looks wet. Anyway, sailing on the lakes of the U.S., the A.C.E. What a cool boat. Or the E.C.E. I love these boats, one of my favorites. Family sailing, 505s out in San Francisco Bay. Always a good ride. Another super boat all over the U.S., in fact, around the world, is the Snipe and the Lightning, designed in 1935 by the great late Olin Stevens. Another terrific boat for racing. And the Opti, for kids of 8 to 15 years old. What should I do? Well, try tacking. Okay. Ah, there's the Snipe. I knew it was in here somewhere. So anyway, there's my daughter. She's a little older now. Cruising. As you heard, I've been to the Arctic and Antarctic. I've done 3 trips south and 1 trip north. People ask, how is it in Antarctica? My answer, cool. Anyway, I put a time-lapse camera on the bow of the ship. It looks like we're going about 50 knots up the Gerlach Strait. Antarctica is unbelievable. You can understand what North America was like during the Great Ice Age. And I love the mammals, the seals, the whales, the birds, wildlife, penguins. None of them seem perturbed by our presence circling our boat. I've gone to Antarctica twice on a sailboat and once on a small ship. Most recent trip down there was 2008. Hey, wait for me. Here's a little swim lessons. Okay. That water's mighty cold, colder than freezing. But the salt water keeps it moving. And these icebergs constantly breaking, cracking, exploding. Hey, watch your step there, buddy. That scared him. Anyway, I highly recommend a trip to Antarctica if you ever get a chance. So I found this little film clip taken in 1938. Some young women out on Long Island Sound on a boat named Bonza. Excuse me. Laughing, joking, hijinks for the camera. There were a couple of guys in the boat who were contemplating climbing the mast. Okay, enough of that. Anyway, cameras were new, a little different today. All right, one more little clip. Somebody asked where are my favorite places to sail. Well, here's three of my favorite places to sail. Just north of Boston, 5,000 boats populate Marblehead Harbor. Eastern Yacht Club, Corinthian, Boston Yacht Club, the Hovey Lighthouse, another beacon of hope. Anyway, very cool, Marblehead. A little further down the coast, we go to Newport, Rhode Island, that held the America's Cup between 1930 and 1983, and this is where the Invitational Cup takes place, sometimes in Narragansett Bay, and other times out in the ocean, another great sailing town. And continuing down the coast, my hometown, Annapolis, Maryland. And we have about 6,000 boats for 35,000 people in our town. The sailing capital of the U.S., capital of Maryland, home of the U.S. Naval Academy. So anyway, a little look at three great sailing cities, Marblehead, Newport, and Annapolis. All right, I have an epic film coming. It's 2 minutes long, and it's my entire life. Here it is, my life story. That's me, 4 years old in the middle. 6 years old in a pram, Toms River, Barnegat Bay, and at 11, I got a penguin. I was mighty proud, but I can assure you it wasn't always smooth sailing. This is me capsized on Barnegat Bay. Ouch. I've done it many times. But I got some silver along the way and raced all kinds of catboats, scows with the legendary Sam Merrick, and off to college I went to race at New York Maritime, and believe it or not, in 4 years I got 2,000 races in at Maritime. This is the college nationals here. I look the same, don't I? Anyway, it was great heady days to do that, and with Vietnam wearing down, there were no shipping jobs, so I ended up coaching at Kings Point for 4 years, and then a couple years I coached at the U.S. Naval Academy. And all this activity got the attention of this guy, and I teamed up with Ted for 2 America's Cups. And what a thrill to sail with Ted in the Cup. I'm grateful that he invited me. He's still a good friend to this day. I saw him last week at the Hall of Fame event, and we raced 12 meters in September, and he still does pretty darn well. I was also the only crew member from Courageous in the America's Cup to join Ted in the infamous Fastnet storm in 1979. For sure, the roughest ocean race on record. We did win that race. And at ESPN, yep, that's me in the pool trying to explain match racing. With my friend Jim Kelly calling the race from Fremantle, jumping over Peter Blake's boat off Fort Lauderdale, have a nice ride. And like I said, that's Cape Horn over my shoulder. I've been up there 3 times. And Antarctica on a 54-foot boat, that's cool. I look forward to the games next summer. It'll be my 6th Olympics. Always fun to cover the games. And even sailing under the watchful eye of the Statue of Liberty. And here's what the Australians did not see. The bridge, look at it. Oh, they don't know. There's my family, my wife, believe it or not, at 37 years. And we have 3 daughters in our home, America's sailing capital. We brag, Annapolis. Let's see here what I got. My boat Mustang, Swan 42. And daughter Brooke went to NYU in grad school at Maryland now. Daughter Christy went to Harvard, and she's at Harvard Law School. And daughter Ashley went to Maryland, is at grad school in Florida. So I got a lot of grad school going here. That's with John Kerry last summer. Fun sailing with him. We didn't do well, but it was fun. This is the nude regatta last spring. We won. The reason is I had the world champion Judd Smith trim in Maine, so that helped. That was the story I told you about. And racing the mighty J-Boat Endeavor, I've done many times over the years, the story I kicked the show off with. So it's been quite a career, as you can see. Racing A-Cats last summer in Barnegat Bay. That was kind of fun. And A-Scows up in Lake Geneva a couple summers ago, Buddy Melga's country. And the Courageous team, next summer we're getting together. Every 5 years our crew gets together. Not a single crew member has ever missed one of our unions. Speaks well of Ted, wouldn't you think? Of course, these days I try to make films and make heroes out of others. This is a film I did with Outward Bound, and while our sailing crew is always a team, our ESPN team is family too. So quite a career, and most recently, the last 2 years I've been president of U.S. Sailing, and we'll do that for 1 more year. So that is my entire career. All right. Thank you. Let's see if I can, thank you. I'm not done, but. Okay, thank you. Maybe I got the wrong thing here and I'm not stopping it. Hold on a second, let's see if. It won't stop. How about if I just hit that, stop.
Well, hopefully we'll have time for some questions.
Okay,
here.
now I got a story or two.
Okay, good.
I'll take some questions.
You got these folks who wanted to ask you some questions.
Well, there's another story that there's another regatta to talk about. I have an assignment for you guys tonight. I told you I'll lock the door and we're not getting out till midnight. Pretend that in front of you is a pad of paper and you've got a pencil and your assignment is to write an essay on what the America's Cup is going to look like 30 years from now. Now, the year is 1980. Freedom, Dennis Conner, has just won the America's Cup. It was the 25th defense, amateur crew, Newport, Rhode Island, 12 meters, all Americans on the boat. Conner wins 4-1 to retain the America's Cup. 1980, that's the way the Cup is. Your assignment, what is the America's Cup going to look like 30 years from now? In fact, that March I was here, and now 30 years, 31 years I'm back. So I'll do the work. I'll take on the job. This is rated PG, by the way. And I'm going to take a look at the America's Cup 30 years from now, the year 2010. I did not inhale. I'm trying. Switzerland. Switzerland will be holders of the America's Cup in the year 2010. That great yachting power whose most famous mariners were the Swiss Family Robinson, who shipwrecked. Who would believe in 1980 that Switzerland would hold the cup? Multi-holes. Let's put this, no, let's have a catamaran and a trimaran. We'll see which faster, a cat or a tri. Who in 1980 would say that would be the way to, let's pay the crews a lot of money. 1980, everybody is an amateur. Let's pay them a lot of money here. What else? Let's put the regatta in Spain. Let's put it in February, in the middle of winter in Spain. What else here? The owners hate each other. They're going to spend years and millions of dollars fighting it out in the New York court system over minute rules of how to run a sailboat. I mean, it can't be that hard to have 2 sailboats going around a course. Anyway, what else here? There's a mutiny on the race committee boat. Anyway, you get the gist. All those things I just went through actually happened in the year 2010. Can you believe that? I mean, this entire history of the America's Cup, and that's what we ended up in 2010, which begs a bigger question. The year is now 2011. The next Cup will be in multi-holes in San Francisco, September 2013. My question, the essay now, is what is the next America's Cup going to look like? Wow, big question. I hope the machine works. I got a little essay here on video. So in advance of that, see if this works. Come on, baby cakes. Okay, here we go. Lights. So here's a quick history lesson of the entire America's Cup, 1851 to the year 2011.
What an historic moment. The 100 Guineas
Sure
Cup
must have been
is
something
now
when the Yacht America beat the British at their own game. In 1899, Thomas Edison took these remarkable pictures of Shamrock going up against Columbia, circling for the start, trying to get an advantage. In 2007, 32nd America's Cup, Alinghi in Switzerland, and New Zealand still trying to get an advantage. Think about that. Thomas Edison uses motion picture, showing it off, using the America's Cup. You're looking at a Reliance, 1903, the biggest boat to ever sail in the Cup. She had 74 crew in the boat. That's a lot of lunches, wouldn't you agree? Now, here's a couple shots. 74 crew, look at all those heads there. Now, here's a couple shots from 77. This is a race that we won by exactly 1 second. That'll get your heart pumping. And coming into the mark on port, Ted Turner asked, how fast do you want me to turn? My answer, as fast as you can. Look at this guy coming in on starboard. You be the judge. Did we make it around in time? Wow. Yeah, we're okay. Ted said, don't do that again. Okay. Anyway, America's Cup skippers like Alan Bond, Ted Turner, Thomas Lipton, all challengers for the Cup. Charlie Barr won 3 times. What a strong guy he was. And Tom Sopwith in 1934. Here's a clip from the 30s.
In their 4th and final victory, Mike Vanderbilt's giant sloop breezes over the finish line to keep the America's Cup in America. Skipper Vanderbilt is rightfully proud of his crew's victory, but pays high tribute to his rival.
Mr. Sopwith has proved himself a most gracious loser. It is easy to be a good winner, but in defeat lies the true test of sport.
Well said there, Commodore. Nathaniel Green Harrisoff designed, built, and sailed on 6 successful Defenders. The man was a genius. Another genius, the great Olin Stevens.
I was probably happiest with Intrepid as a boat that was a nice advance on what was state of the art.
Down below, where that looked like a long afternoon, grinding witches down below decks. But Intrepid won. Of course, there's controversies in the America's Cup. Lord Dunraven in 1895 accused the Americans of cheating. A year later, J.P. Morgan, a financier, held an inquiry, and here's a shock, he found the charges unfounded. 1970, collision between Gretel II and Intrepid. Wow. Presidents showed up. There's President Roosevelt in 1937. President Eisenhower watched the Cup races in 58. President Kennedy cheered on Weatherly in 62. President Nixon cheered on Mossbacker in 70. President Reagan had Dennis Conner to the White House. President Clinton visited the boats when they were in New Zealand. And President Obama had Larry Ellison team at the White House last summer. Now, I always like it when the helmsman and tactician are in sync with each other. Calamities. Valkyrie blowing out a spinnaker just before the finish line. Ouch. Shamrock 3's mast breaking in 1901. Ooh. Vanity's topmast pulling off. That doesn't look fast. 1987 against New Zealand, Dennis Conner blew out a jib and still won this race. The French lost the keel and capsized in 1995. Young America in 1998 cracked in half. They all survived. Luna Rosa broke her mast in the trials that year. Paul Kayard in 99 blew out spinnaker after a spinnaker 03. The Kiwis almost sank and broke their mast. But of all these calamities, the most dramatic had to be in 1995 when One Australia cracked in half and sank in the middle of a race. The skipper was John Bertrand, who had a simple explanation for what had gone wrong. John?
Can you describe what happened on this leg to windward?
Well, the boat broke in half and sank.
Well said, John. But the most dramatic moment in Cup history was race 7 of the 1983 America's Cup.
We're going to go out there and do the job and turn the tables. That's our whole objective.
A 132-year winning streak was on the line. Score was 3-3. It came down to the last race.
We've learned how to sail against Liberty.
It's going to be very exciting to be involved in the race of a century.
And in that race, Australia came from behind to take the lead and get the gun. It was a shot heard round the world.
Today, Australia 2 was just a better boat, and they beat it. And we have no excuses.
And I'm so pleased that we can say not goodbye to Newport and to many friends here, but an open invitation to the people of Newport and the people of America to come to Perth in Western Australia and try and win it back. We'll welcome you.
Well, sad day for the New York Yacht Club after 132 years, but I was there in Australia when the Cup arrived, and I'll tell you, it was a big day in that country to actually win this trophy. But give Connor credit. 40 months later, aboard patriotically named Stars and Stripes, and we covered it live on ESPN, Connor reclaimed the Cup. And then we get to the 33rd America's Cup. Who would have believed this in 1980? Valencia, Spain, the month of February, best out of 3. A trimaran and a catamaran. The American boat stuck in irons to windward of the line at the gun. Olingi gets a good start, but they got a penalty turn to do. And I could do that. Anyway, Olingi is half a mile ahead. Larry Ellison's trimaran comes up on the wind, 20 miles to windward, 20 miles in return. The Americans have a half a mile to make up. That catamaran looked mighty fast, sailing 3 times the speed of the wind. 6 knots of wind, 18 knots of speed. But Ellison's trimaran, sailing higher and faster, quickly narrowed the gap. And soon, Oracle was almost even. Look at this technological marvel going upwind. They had helium balloons in the windward hull. They're almost even. And at one point, in a puff of wind, it was blowing 9, looked like the trimaran might capsize. Well, you're going to capsize, you got a wing, what do? Well, how about rolling up the jib, as Walter Cronkite suggested. The question here is how fast is the boat going to go under wing only? So they roll up the jib, and we soon found out. Wing only, pretty darn fast. As he went right on by. Woo! I bet that took the wind out of Olingi's sails. Now take a look at this wing. 238 feet off the deck. It was built in 11 sections. It was controlled by little motors down on deck to trim it, with a guy with a laptop computer controlling the wing. And the whole thing they were scared of, would the whole thing break? Anyway, look at that. And if you want to see how big it is, let's compare it to the size of a jumbo jet. So here's a jumbo jet, size of the wing, an Airbus A380, a little bit bigger than a 747. And take a look at Larry Ellison's wing, twice the area of a jumbo jet. I bet it was cheap, too. Well, anyway, Oracle now in the lead. And take a look at the dagger board there. It was curved. The idea being that we'd go down into water and actually have to act as a hydrofoil to give the boat lift. In contrast, Olingi had a straight down dagger board, which obviously was a little slower. So another innovation. The first mark, Oracle ahead by a 1 mile advantage. In race 2, Oracle took the lead again and ended up winning by a nautical mile. So Larry Ellison's $500 million 10-year quest to get the cup finally became a reality. Well, a happy day for them, but what next? Well, what next? A 72-foot catamaran scheduled for September 2013 in San Francisco Bay. 46-foot wide, 130-foot wing mast, 11 crew aboard the boat. Looking at this, it really makes you wonder what is going to happen 30 years from now. I'll answer that question soon. And in advance of that, they've been racing these 45-footers. The next event is in a couple weeks in San Diego. 6 crew, mighty speedy. Now you look at all this stuff, who better than the great Walter Cronkite to put all of this in perspective? Walter, take it away. Whoop, whoa, 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 hold on, Walter. You got to crash first. This looks bad. That's Russell Coots going down through the wing. All right, here you go, Walter. Tell us about it.
People who love the Cup, and I'm one of them, speak of the magnetism and its mystique. The question isn't why the Cup has survived for so long. It's why it has thrived for so long. Someone once wrote, "The America's Cup is a synonym of things brave and big and famous." To those words, I would add one more: spectacular. No inanimate object is more beautiful than America's Cup yacht in full flight in a stirring breeze, racing for glory and sailing into our affections. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it was.
Thank you. So, when I did a show for ESPN in '07, I did this History of the America's Cup, and one of my friends at ESPN, Jeff Mason, said, you know, you're so much part of the Cup, you ought to be just interviewed in the film with everybody else and let somebody else narrate it. So I came up with the idea, well, who should narrate my beloved project? I'd spent 2 years collecting all the rights to all this old footage, and I got an idea. So I sent the guy a letter, and 2 days later, his agent called and said, Mr. Cronkite would be honored. And the man is a genius with the English language. It was the last show Walter Cronkite ever did. Isn't that cool? Showed up with his jacket and tie at the studio. I mean, all these guys got earrings and tattoos, and Walter, hello, how are you doing? It was really strong. Well, I want to end with a little story about how important sailing is. Now, as you can see, I've had a good life around the waterfront, and I've lost 6 out of 7 races I've done in my career, but along the way, you learn stuff. But sailing really saved me, and here's how. In 2003, I was covering my 7th America's Cup for ESPN at that time, and I'm in New Zealand, and unlike all the other cups and all the things I've been doing, I went from being the fastest guy running through the airport to the slowest guy in the airport. And anyway, I had a terrible cough and blotches all over the place and night sweats. I'd wring out my T-shirt waking up every morning. And when I got home, I went off on a lecture tour, and I had 63 clubs all set up, and after about 10, I literally crumpled up. So I went to a doctor friend of mine that I owned a J22 with, and he did a test, another test, and I was diagnosed with a horrible disease, lymphoma. Now, this was quite ironic for me, because for 10 years up to that point, I'd been an honorary chairman raising money for leukemia at our Leukemia Cups. So to come down with this disease was quite ironic. Now, when you go through cancer treatments, and I did 2 bone marrow transplants, along the way, I got mighty depressed, feeling really bad. And I'm in the hospital one day, and I couldn't walk at this point. I'm 80 pounds lighter than I am now. I'd been battling this for 1.5 years, and I thought it was the end. And I'm laying in bed, and I'm calling the nurse, and she's not showing up, and I'm getting frustrated. And the last thing I had going for me was the sun coming through the window. And I'm laying there, so I started thinking about sailing with a couple stories. The first story was being that kid in the sneak box, losing the course chart, but needing a goal. My goal right now is getting out of this bed. And then I thought about a race that I did when I was in college. I was very enthused to get to the college nationals. It was single-handed in the weekender, soon the laser. And the first race, I went to hike out on the start and missed the strap and went in the water and went upside down. Anybody do that? Last. Next race, I'm coming in on port for a port tack approach. I lost the tiller. I clunked into a starboard tacker. 720. Last. I came back into the dock. Very upset. I'm last. I wanted to go to the nationals. My coach says, look, forget about winning. You're in last. Here's what we're going to do. Keep your foot under the strap. Don't hit anybody. One step at a time. And most importantly, he said, just go out for fun. Let's see how you do, and we'll talk about it. Well, with my new attitude, I kept my foot under the strap. Didn't hit anybody, and won the next race. In fact, I won every single race and ended up winning the Mid-Atlantics and went on and won every race in the Nationals that year. Big turnaround. Fast forward.
I'm out in San Diego covering yet another America's Cup. And we had about 10 days by the end of the trials and the start of the Cup, and one of our geniuses at ESPN came up with this idea. Jobson, we want you to go out to an aircraft carrier and do a story on a pilot, a Top Gun pilot, and see if you can find any analogies between that pilot and an America's Cup helmsman. Now this was pretty cool because I actually got to do a takeoff and a landing on an aircraft carrier in a jet. I'm sitting there in this jet, my heart's pounding, the catapult, you know, the launcher, we're getting up there, and this young lieutenant is on the headset. You know, I look like another president with my gear on, and the pilot says to me, I can hear in my headset, "Sir, is this your first time?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Mine too." "No, I've done 210 launches. Don't worry about a thing. You'll be fine." Well, anyway, that was pretty cool. I'll tell you, aircraft carriers look big when you're on them. When you're circling around, you're going to land this thing down there. Ooh. Well, anyway, that night we're doing night operations, and I'm standing on the stern of the ship, and these F-14s are coming in, their wings as close as that wall, and the squadron gets down on deck, and the LSO, the landing safety officer, says to me, "Hey, aren't you Jobson?" "Yeah, I am." He says, "You don't remember this, but you came to my high school one time and got me so excited about the Naval Academy that I ended up applying. I got my appointment, my commission. Here I am in the Navy, and I feel bad," he says, "because I never got around to thank you." And that night I thought, well, we're all mentors in a lot of different ways, and you never know how helping somebody else out, and that was kind of a nice story. So back to the hospital bed, thinking about being in a sneak box. How did I overcome that bad day in the collegiate mid-Atlantics, one step at a time, have a little fun with it. It's funny, when you're nice to the nurses, they actually come around and help you. And I thought at the time, why should I do this? And then I realized if some way, somehow, I can get myself out of this jam with this lymphoma, maybe I could be some inspiration to other people. So none of us know what's going to happen in life, but I'll tell you this. When you help other people out, whatever it is, in the end, it just might be you that has helped out the most. So all these millions we've raised in the leukemia, and now in 18 years I'm still the chairman, we're up to $39 million raised, I ended up being the recipient of it. So that's my message. Thank you.
Do we have a couple questions? Will you take the questions from up there?
Thank you.
We do have time for a couple of questions, so if you'd raise your hands, we'll get the microphone to you if somebody has a question. Yes, sir, we got right up here, and he's bringing the mic to you.
Thank you.
A few years ago, Larry Ellison came to Fayetteville, Arkansas to make a donation. And I had an opportunity to ask him a question. And I asked him, does he believe that risk-taking is something you're inherently born with or something that you acquire through life experience?
That's a good question to ask Larry Ellison. What did he say?
Well, I want to ask you first, and then I'll tell you what he said.
Well, nature or nurture. I don't know what comes from within, but I will tell you this. If you help young people and give them a challenge and let them rise to it, a lot of people will rise to that challenge. So that's the trick with young people, is to get them inspired. And I try and do that with my stories and tales. But if you try to micromanage people, somehow it doesn't work. That's why pushing young kids too hard in sailing, let them have fun, let them capsize, let things happen, and then they'll want to do it. My first daughter, man, 6 years old, I had her in a boat, I'm coaching her, and she kind of rejected it after a while. The two younger ones, I waited till they started asking to go sailing. Of course, then when I got the younger ones going, the older one wanted to come back. So it all worked out, but it was a valuable lesson. So I think that a lot comes from within, but the people around you that helped me out certainly inspired me to do that. Larry I know pretty well. I've interviewed him, sailed with him many times, and been at his houses and stuff. He is one driven guy, I'll tell you that. He takes no prisoners, and we'll see how he does defending the cup. He probably will do it. So anyway, that's pretty cool that you asked that question.
Well, and he said he was inherently born with it.
What's that?
He said he was inherently born with it.
He was inherited. You know, Ellison's interesting. His step-parents actually came from Russia, and they couldn't pronounce the name to the immigration officer at Ellis Island. So what's your name? Well, Ellis' son. We're the son of Ellis. So that's how Larry Ellison's ancestors got the name from Ellis Island. Any others?
You talk a lot about the America's Cup, and you know, we're going to have a real huge shift here to multi-holes, the last America's Cup and then this new one with the giant cats. But what's your opinion of this? I mean, my feeling is I like the old 12 meters because if you got a puff, maybe you gained a quarter of a boat length. And so the boats are always really close. And so you could always see lots of boat-on-boat action, lots of attacking and counter moves. But one little puff in a cat and the guy's a mile and a half ahead.
Okay. I'm doing my essay. All right, it's 2011. What's America's Cup going to look like 30 years from now? 12 meters. Thank you very much. Newport, Rhode Island would be pretty good. Amateur cruise like the Invitational Cup. How about this one? How about if we put all the Americans on the American boat and the French on the French boat and the New Zealanders on the New Zealand boat? I think we'd be a little bit better off. You know, I've met with Coots, and we're going to talk again here in a couple weeks. My view of good television and good racing is when there's a compelling reason to win, a patriotic thing. They've missed that boat. I like races where it's close and there's lead changes. You know, a 40-0 football game might be fun for the home team, but it's not really great. You want it coming down right to the end. Both teams have a chance. I mean, did you see that women's soccer game last summer? You know, first of all, huge ratings on ESPN, and most people, I had a feeling, don't know much about soccer, but it was an American women's team, and it was really cool. And in the end, Japan won, and I have a sense if they played 10 games, the Japanese would have won one, but they won that day. And those American players, they weren't down. There was, boy, what a great game. They did a good job. Could you believe how good they were? That was really, you know, they were enthused. That is the essence of the sport. So I think that's missed a little bit in the America's Cup. So I would put it a little more amateur. I'd get boats that are close with lead changes. I'd make the patriotic part of it. And then I love people like Ted Turner and Dennis Conner that are so outrageous. You either love them or hate them, but either way, it's really cool. So that's my view of the America's Cup.
Let's thank Gary Jobson very much for being here.
Thank you. So can I last with one thought? Thank you.
Sure.
All right, the crescendo here. Let me leave you with one thought. I showed a lot of crash and burn, light wind, heavy wind, Olympics, America's Cup, snipes, lightnings, cruising, all kinds of stuff. Take it from me. The most important thing in sailing is simple. Sailing is all about having fun. I hope you had a good time. Please invite me back before 31 years because I'm not getting any younger, and I'd be happy to sign books for anybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.